India is my motherland. I was born in a small town in North India, near the foothills of the Himalayas, and finished my high school there. Around the age of 18, I moved to New York along with my mother to join my father there, and I started my college in Manhattan. It was indeed a huge culture shock, but it inspired me to learn and unlearn a lot about myself and life. While all this shift was happening, I sensed something very powerful, very subtle, shifting within me. It was my love and fondness for India's spiritual wisdom. I guess a fish wouldn't know the value of water until it's out of the water. I still remember that after being in New York for a few months, I fell in love with India all over again. I think that's just how love works sometimes. Maybe it was this love for India that I started teaching retreats in Himalayas. I feel it keeps me connected to the root of my love for India. It keeps me connected to the spirituality in India. And I've been teaching the retreats there for almost 10 years now. And the last retreat that I taught there was just last month. And while I was sharing the lessons, sharing the stories with all the students in the retreat, I decided to create a podcast out of the lessons that I've learned from India. If I mention each and every lesson, I'll need at least 100 episodes. But I think this is a good start. In this episode, I want to share my perspective and experiences that I have witnessed in India. These lessons are not derived from any religious or popular beliefs about India, but they're simply my own perspectives. I'm really excited to take you to India through this podcast. I am Chandresh Bhardwaj, and this is Break the Norms. Maybe it's completely out of love, or maybe it's a fact. But I feel India is more than just a country. It's more than just a geographical location. I find India to be a mix of countless experiences, countless powerful lessons. There are countless energy vortexes all around India, where you don't need to do anything and simply just become open and available, and you will experience the energy shift in you. I have experienced it personally firsthand number of times, or countless times, honestly. I have witnessed it among the students who go into these retreats with me. I have witnessed it among the fellow seekers, in my guru, in my fellow friends, in so many people, that when they become truly open, available, and receptive to these energy vortexes, then shifts happen. And these shifts are so powerful, so healing, so liberating, that they make you think about India in a completely different way. And before I move ahead and share the lessons that I want to share, there's something that I want to share with you. It's an interesting observation that I have been noticing since I was a little kid. So, I'm a big movie fan. I love cinema. It could be cinema from India, from Hollywood, from different countries. I love a good storytelling experience. And in Oscar, if you watch Oscar awards, the Hollywood awards, they have a foreign movie category there where different countries send a movie to the Oscars, and the committee selects, I think, one movie from each country, but only, I think, 4 or 5 movies are ultimately nominated for the best foreign movie. And in all these years, Indian cinema, the Bollywood, they have sent tons of movies. But only the movie that's about Indian poverty, that's the movie that gets selected, and that's the movie that gets a little ahead in the race for the awards. And in the past, the movies that have gotten award or even gotten some recognition, they were about Indian poverty. The most famous one is Slumdog Millionaire. But many years ago, before Slumdog happened, there was a movie called Salam Bombay that was also about the poverty, the crime, the slums. And I don't feel disappointed or surprised when so many of my own friends or students or clients, they see India through the lens of Hollywood. I would do the same thing if I always lived here and my introduction to India was through these movies. I would think that India is just about slums or crime or poverty. Or if you read spiritual books, you may start thinking India is only about spirituality and every person there is walking with a crown chakra open. That's also wrong. The truth is, India is a mix of so many religions, so many belief systems, so many languages, cultures, food. It's such a powerful variety of emotions that you cannot confine India to one story. Even the lessons that I'm sharing today, they probably comprise of 1% of India, maybe. I haven't experienced India in its full glory, and I was born there. It's just impossible to visit and experience each and every part of India. It's huge, it's powerful, and it's something that you need to experience rather than just hear or read about. So I hope this podcast will inspire you to explore India and other countries in a different light. And I hope these lessons will bring you some hope, some strength, some clarity in how you understand your awareness. So the first lesson is witnessing divinity in every being. How many of you have heard Namaste or you have used it in your yoga classes? Namaste means the divine in me honors and acknowledges the divine in you. Although it's such a common greeting that's used in India and the spirituality that's practiced in even Western countries, but not many people use it from the context of its root meaning. How many of you have used Namaste and truly acknowledged the divine in you and also acknowledged the divine in others? But this word Namaste, it explains a lot about what India is all about. The Indian spirituality brings a lot of importance that you are more than your body, you are more than your thoughts, you are more than your emotions. And to understand this concept in a day-to-day life, it uses Namaste and tons of other powerful teachings, which reminds us that you are divine being going through this human experience. And when you start to understand the traditions in India, you'll be surprised to see that it puts so much importance on enlightenment. Every ritual in India, from birth to death, it's done with one single intention, and the intention is liberation, moksha, nirvana, self realization, self awareness. From the moment a child is born, or when they get married, or when they start a new business, or when they are about to die, or when they finally die, every ritual, every tradition that's done around that moment is intended for one big purpose of liberation. And it's done in such a scientific manner that you truly understand it's not some blind faith. It's being done with so many important instructions, guidelines, and that there are energies moving there. You start to feel it, you start to experience it. And then it becomes very difficult for you to deny it. You start to experience there's some powerful shift happening when we do these rituals with a certain intention. And witnessing divinity is a very powerful intention in the time of marriage. When they get married under a Hindu tradition, the couple is asked to walk around the fire and go through 7 circles. And each circle has a certain promise, a certain commitment. And one of the commitment is to have intention of witnessing divinity in each other. Also, if you understand tantra, it's a very powerful intention in tantra for the couple to understand and acknowledge and honor the divinity in each other. Witnessing divinity is a very powerful way to not only respect every being out there, but also respect your own existence. I keep seeing some of the most wonderful, beautiful humans who cannot come to a level of self love. They find it very difficult to have some worthiness for who they are. They find it very difficult to have worthiness for success and love and abundance. And one of the most beautiful things that I experienced growing up in India was to witness yourself as a divine being. And obviously, as a child, it doesn't make much sense to you. But if you're growing up around the right circumstances, and if you are making the effort of understanding the meaning of your existence, then this divinity starts to play a role for you. And one thing I want to mention here, which I find extremely beautiful in this lesson of witnessing divinity, that in Indian spirituality, you could meditate or worship or honor any form of divinity, and still it promises to give you enlightenment. Still it promises to give you that truth and that higher taste of consciousness. This is the reason why India is known to have 33 million gods and goddesses. It doesn't mean that there are literally 33 million gods and goddesses, and this huge number exists because every being in India is looked upon as a symbol of divinity, as a symbol of that divine being. When you are in India, you'll be surprised to see that people not only worship the famous gods and goddesses such as Kali, Shiva, Ganesha, but they also bow down to a mountain. Himalayas mountains, they are worshipped and honored in such a powerful way. The rivers are honored. The river Ganga, if you've heard of it. Every day, hundreds and thousands of people gather around Ganga to chant mantras, to chant songs, to worship it, to dance around it, to simply honor the divine feminine that Ganga is. You can worship cow, peacock. You can worship a lion. You could meditate on anything, even a single rock. And even that will take you to the gateway of higher consciousness. And that's something very liberating about the spirituality in India, that there are multiple pathways to experience one higher truth. Everything leads to that one truth. And if you don't want to believe in God, if you don't want to worship any form of divinity, guess what? You could simply witness the divinity in your loved one, in your beloved. And even being in love ultimately takes you into the higher state of consciousness. And that's why falling in love in the true Indian tradition is nothing less than a cosmic experience. Obviously, you may not find many couples today who are living that experience of divinity, but this podcast is about the lost lessons or the important lessons that still exist. And if you truly use it in your day-to-day life, you will start to experience a very powerful shift. And now I want to mention the most powerful aspect of witnessing this divinity. And I have to use tantra when I mention this. So the word tantra means technology. It means technique. And in spiritual sense, tantra means the technique of self-realization, the technology of cultivating that self-awareness. So in tantra, you are taught a technology, you're taught techniques. And through various techniques, you start to experience the higher consciousness. And one of the most fascinating technology that tantra teaches us is to have the technology of creating divinity. You heard it absolutely right. Creating divinity through rituals, through mantras, through meditation, through the power of your awareness. And this is something you truly have to experience firsthand. In our retreat, we have one day that's focused on invoking the divinity, invoking the Shiva consciousness through various rituals, through mantras, through powerful meditations. And Tantra says, if you use the technology right, you will experience the divinity in every being out there. So there are technologies and techniques to witness and cultivate the divinity in your beloved. There are techniques to cultivate the divinity in your own being. You could pick a piece of rock from the street, and there will be a technology to create divinity in that piece of rock. You could pick 10 red roses from Whole Foods or from any grocery store. Doesn't have to be Whole Foods. And you will experience the divinity in those roses. I got to know this lesson when I was very young. It did not make any sense to me at the time. But with age, with experience, with failures and successes and, all the experiences that life brings you, these lessons start to make a lot of sense. And on a good day, when I come across humans, I witness them through this lens of divinity. And I truly feel what a powerful shift it creates in how I relate to them. And while I mentioned this, I got to be very honest. It's not something that comes super easily or super naturally. It takes time to cultivate this muscle. But I take the time, I make the effort because the taste of this divinity is so powerful. It has completely shifted my friendships, my relationships in such a powerful way. There's no room for hating or judging someone. There's no room for objectifying someone when you witness them through the lens of divinity. So this is one important lesson that I wanted to share with you. To witness the divinity in you, in others, and also meditate to invoke the divinity around you and try to understand you and divine are not two separate phenomena. You both are part of one melody. You both are part of one thread. And when you understand it, that's when the magic starts to happen. The second lesson is the lesson of contentment, the lesson of gratitude. I got first taste of it through my nani, my grandma. Throughout my life, I grew up with a very strong belief that divinity or God or universe, it speaks through my grandma. And any time I needed anything, instead of praying, I would tell things to her. And things always would manifest. And just the way the true divinity performs and evolves, that's how my nani has always, given me that freedom to evolve, to be fearless. And I truly feel all the fearlessness in me, it comes from the unconditional love that I got from her. And she passed away last year. And when I heard the news, I felt lost, hopeless, devastated, shattered. But within a few days of her death, I started experiencing that before she was only here in her physical form, and now she's here, there, and everywhere. And that's a feeling I'm still getting to embrace and accept. But I had to mention these glimpses of her because she gave me the lesson of contentment in a very simple way. I remember when I finished my high school and I moved to New York. I was in business school in Manhattan. I was seeing a lot of glamour, a lot of power around me. And when I got into Wall Street, I again saw a lot of power around me. And when I left Wall Street, there was insecurity in me if I'm going to survive as a spiritualist, as a spiritual teacher. And I always used to tell her that, Nani, please pray for me, that I make this much money, that I get to travel in these countries, that I end up writing some really powerful bestseller books, and my list would go on and on. But she would always respond with one thing, that I'm not going to pray for all these things, but I'm going to pray for only one thing, and that's your happiness. I will pray that you always stay happy. And I used to tell her, happiness is not that important, Nani. I could cry in my Rolls Royce. I think that's more important. And she would tell me, she would give me this very interesting look that you have lost your mind. You need happiness. And I think her look was also telling me one thing. You're too young right now. You're 21. And that's why you think success is about all these things. Wait for a few years and life will teach you that happiness is the most important thing. And of course, now I'm 32 and I truly feel that her blessing of being happy is the only blessing I need in life. I mean, this is the reason I continue to work to share the lessons of happiness, to share the root of happiness with others. And the more I share, the more I realized the root of my own happiness also. And growing up in India, this is not something surprising. There are a lot of people there who truly feel and live this lesson of contentment. I remember when the first ever client who went to India with me, he was looking at the people on the streets, and some people didn't have homes, some people looked that they are not the most wealthy people, and he was observing all of them very closely, and he said, I clearly see that so many of these people don't have the basic resources of life. But what I've observed is every single person is just happy. And that happiness is not, dancing on the streets, but it's a contentment. It's simple, effortless happiness. It's effortless joy. They're happy in little things. And I did not notice this until he mentioned it. Because I guess I grew up there, so it was very difficult, or it's not as easy for me to see these things as it is for someone who has never been to India. But now, in the last 10 years, I have observed these lessons of contentment in so many powerful ways. And I'll share this interesting story with you that gives me goosebumps when I share it with others. It's such a simple story, but when you connect it with your life, you will hopefully experience some self-reflection through it. So this happened in Himalayas. There are ice cream sellers in the small villages of Himalayas, and they make these ice creams in a very interesting way. They put the milk and the herbs, the spices, the flowers, and very interesting flavors in the milk. And then they keep the mix in the mountains. And overnight it freezes. And next morning, when they open it, it's ice cream. It's made by nature. It's obviously one of the most delicious ice creams that I have ever tasted. And I have not had ice cream since I've moved to US. Maybe 3 or 4 times is the only times I've had ice cream here. It troubles my stomach every time I try ice cream there. But I always have this ice cream. It has never given me any stomach troubles. So I was there with this group of people from LA, New York, London, and we were meditating in a tantra shrine. It was located in a very small village in the Himalayas. And when we got out of the shrine, there was this guy selling ice cream, and I wanted it. So I stopped there and I told them, you can have it at your own risk. I mean, I'm fully sure this will not give you any trouble. So if you want, you can have it, or you can just have a taste of it. So everybody started tasting, and they all liked it so much that they started having, a cup of their own. And they sell it on banana leaves. So the per leaf cost was 10 rupees, which is roughly 15 cents. And when all of us had the ice cream, the total bill was still less than $1. And everybody was surprised that, this is such a delicious ice cream and still so cheap. So they started talking to him, and they started understanding the process and, the whole history of the ice cream. And he mentioned, that his grandfather used to sell these, and his father did the same thing, and now he's doing it. And the people with me, they started giving him business lessons that, you could go to city and have an ice cream store, and, you could create a franchisee with it. So they were sharing all the lessons that we come across living in US or Europe or in these countries. And he looked at all of us with a very awkward gaze. And then after 2 minutes of listening, he was like, why do I need to do it? What's the reason? Why should I do it? And one of us, said, because it's more money. That's why. And he said, but I need only this much money. And, then the people with me were explaining him, of course you need this much money, but what if you make more money? It's more fun, more enjoyment, more freedom. And he said, I already have freedom. I live in this beautiful little house with my family. My son is studying in school. He wants to go to college. I have enough money saved for him. People love me here. I love coming here. I reach here at 12 p.m. and I'm done by 4 p.m. every day. It's a wonderful life. So please explain me again. Why do I need to go through the whole thing? Both the parties were in argument, and I clearly saw this ice cream seller just fails to understand the argument because in his head, he just doesn't know why he needs to make more money. And then, I intervened and I explained both the parties. So this guy who has always lived in these small village, he doesn't have any greed of making more money. He's just very content man, and that's just every other person in these Himalayan villages. These people are just so grateful for what they have, and they don't have any ambition of going to the city and experiencing the city life. And then explained the ice cream seller that this is what everybody was trying to explain him, to have more freedom through the money. And he said, but the method they are telling me, it's not going to give me freedom, it's going to give me more stress. And I said, of course, tell me about it. That's just how all of us are living our lives in US or in the Western countries. And after he heard the whole thing, he said something very interesting. He said, I spent all my life in these Himalayan villages, in these mountains. And let me tell you one thing, that I have observed so many powerful animals in these mountains, from a monkey to a bear to some violent animals. And he said, all the animals follow one rule. They kill only the amount of animals what they need in that moment. So if they're hungry for just one animal, they'll kill only one. They do not kill 20 animals and stock up for the next 20 days. It's only the human being who likes to stock up things, who likes to live in the future. And he said maybe it's because of these animals that we have learned to live in the present moment, that we don't stock up for the future. We simply experience and live in this present moment. And when he said that, and I translated that to the students who were there, all of us were in complete silence. And I could see that every one of them had a deep honor and respect for him. And everybody sat in the car silently. And we came back to the resort where we were staying. And next morning, every person was talking about this important lesson that ice cream seller gave us. And I know, and you know, that we have complicated our lives so much that it's very difficult for us to embrace this principle of not stocking up for the future. I mean, from the bank accounts to the fridge to our clothing, everything is focused on the future. We have forgotten to live in the present. We have forgotten that there's a way to be in the present moment. And, we are paying the gurus, the therapists, the life coaches to be in the present moment. But it's something that's so natural, so effortless in all of us that we don't need anyone's help. We only need to go deeper into our own breathing, into our own awareness, and things will start to happen. And third lesson is staying receptive. So I believe I already mentioned somewhere in the podcast that when the students land in India for the retreat, they all are excited to hear some powerful mantras or to know some powerful meditation techniques. And I feed that hunger of them, but I keep bringing them to this important reminder of staying receptive. And it's a very common saying in the Himalayas that when you become fully receptive to Himalayas, the shift in consciousness starts to happen. That you don't need to perfect a meditation posture or a yoga technique. Simply being receptive and available starts creating powerful shifts. And I still remember this happened many years ago. We were staying in Himalayas and there was a huge beehive in the resort. And everybody was scared of it, that what if the bees start to, making us their snack. And I remember the hotel manager came and he was like, they'll not hurt you. They mind their own business. So as long as you mind your own business, nothing will happen. And thankfully, nothing happened. And after the retreat was done, I shared this with my father that, there was this beehive and everybody was scared of it. But it inspired us to be more patient and to be trusting of the experience. And my father said, this beehive explains the entire spirituality of human consciousness. And I said, how? He said, when you look at these beehives, look at how perfectly they're created. It almost looks like a colony, an apartment building, with each bee having their own little apartment. And the bees don't go to any bee school to understand these lessons. It's just ingrained in them, it's just part of their DNA. And I remember, my father told me, just like the bees have it in them to create these beehives without any external knowledge, the same way human being is born to create their experience of divinity and self-awareness without any external knowledge. But we interfere in that natural process because we are taught we are not enough. We are taught we don't know enough, and it's not okay to not know enough. So we start to read, we start to trust the voices of others rather than our own voice. We start to listen to tapes and audios of spiritual people, and we borrow their spirituality and start to feel this is our spirituality. And so many interesting factors step in, and we end up corrupting our natural, effortless flow of spirituality. The truth is, you and I, all of us, we are born with this effortless connection with higher awareness. We are born with this effortless, choiceless awareness. And if we remain innocent, honest, pure, things will just move in the most smooth manner. And when I mention pure, honest, and effortless, I mean just be who you are. Don't try to become something. Just allow your life to bloom as it wants to bloom. So many of you want to be a musician, a writer, but you are sitting in an accountant's office, trying to balance the balance sheets and feeling frustrated and angry. So many of you are waiting and wanting a sign so that you could leave a job or a relationship. But it's not happening because you're not trusting your voice, because that trust was lost while you were trusting the voices of others. Somehow you lost your relationship with your own awareness. So the last lesson in this podcast is to stay supremely receptive toward your own existence. Be supremely receptive to the sky, to the breeze, to the rain, and stop interfering in the natural process of life. I cannot tell you how many times I have come across people where they already know the answer, but they are not able to trust that answer. And they hire someone like me to say it in words. And I tell them, you don't need me for this. I tell them, you need you for this. You need to trust your breathing, your awareness. And it's okay if you trust it and it ends up in a failure, it ends up in a disaster, because so many of these disasters will ultimately result in your truth. How many of us have seen these trees in nowhere in the mountains? These trees go through storm, earthquake, rain, hot sun, and tons of other interesting fluctuations in nature. But if you ask the tree if it gets the choice of being in your lobby or in that mountain, it's going to choose the mountain to be its home, even though it's giving him tons of troubles, because that's where the tree is supposed to plant itself. That's where its home is. And being in your home doesn't mean that it's going to be always blooming, always joyful, always dancing, always positive. It means you're going to go through the most organic and powerful lessons, which will make you uncomfortable, which will make you uneasy. But that's what life is. When you are in your home, there is a sense of empowerment, there's a sense of belonging. You may experience tons of uncertainty, and that's perfectly okay. But continue to stay receptive. And I could go on and share the lessons, but I just realized this episode has gone into 38 minutes already. So I'm going to end this podcast right here. And I will share tons of other lessons through other episodes. But if you like this episode, please share it. Please write a review. Please rate it. It's going to increase the visibility of this podcast. And join me on Instagram or visit my website cbmeditates.com to submit your questions. I'm going to start small episodes with questions as well, where I'll be answering all the questions that you sent me. So feel free to send me your questions through my website, cbmeditates.com, or through my Instagram, which is also cbmeditates. Talk to you soon. Take care. For those who have been asking about more options to learn and work with me, you're most welcome to attend my workshops, retreats, and talks. I'm doing 2 weekend spiritual gatherings in New York and Sedona. From May 24th to May 27th, I'm teaching a course at the amazing Omega Institute in New York. It's titled Break the Norms, Meditation Secrets for a Life of Courage and Bliss. And we'll be going through meditation methods, mantras, and other consciousness hacks to deepen our spiritual practice. And the retreat in Sedona is happening from August 14th to August 18th. It's titled Rise in Love, and it's focused on releasing your suppression, healing your heart, and finally rising in love. This is going to be a retreat to channel the strength of your heart in order to experience the full potential of your love, your presence, and all the healing that you have to offer and experience. In addition, there are always talks and workshops that I'm doing in New York, LA, and other places. So keep a check on my Instagram, on my website, and whatever works for you, go for it. I hope this podcast may travel through the untapped universe of your darkness, light, courage, passion, and so much more. Please do subscribe and be ready to break your norms. I am so excited and very honored to be part of your sacred journey through this podcast.